Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to those of you in the three-dimensional frequency who are tuning in to my content. Hello all, and hello to all of consciousness who will eventually begin to watch my content, as they will foresee the future of Gaia as they ascend into their journeys and into their missions and into their light working spree of the soul that they are and of the soul that they've descended down to encompass. And as they foresee such ascension symptoms, such ascension energies, and such ascension journeys will dawn upon them, upon an entirety of a humanity that has been so lost in the distortions of a reality field of what is. And as they come to an understanding of that in which they are and that in which they've always been, they will seek me out. They will seek my content. You will seek my content. As my message goes far, as my messages go deep, as my messages project into a reality field of a three-dimensional frequency, all that you are, and all that I shall ever be within a frequency of unity consciousness, within the unity consciousness perceived of that in which you are and that in which I've always been, and that in which you've always been within any given moment in time of no time. And as this is the second time that I'm sitting here to tell you the story of Gaia, to tell you the story of Terra, and to tell you the story of my daughter, Akira, and to tell you the story of the 7 in total of the fractalled souls who Gaia's oversoul has ever fractalled out within a time so arduous to accompany her in this mission of ascension within a reality field, within a humanoid body in which they sit in. This is the third time that I'm sitting here in attempt to record this video for you, as the first time I did so as a podcast, and because there was some staticky interference, I decided to sit and record a video, and I just actually hopped off of the said video that I was recording to come to a realization that the audio wasn't hooked up properly. And so the third time is really the charm, and I'm sitting here as a third and final time, as I know this time is a time of forgiveness, of a unity so great and so grand that the 2 times prior to this that I had attempted to record the video was not on point and was not in line spiritually, in line by its message, and in line frequency wise with what I was trying to project. And perhaps that is why I'm on the timeline of this third video in which I will project my best into the frequency of the ethers for you to acquire, for you to absorb, and for you to listen to. And as the fairies from the 4-dimensional frequency have gathered around me, to sit around me, to giggle around me, to laugh around me, as they were around me and within the recording of the 2 videos, as they've vowed to be surrounding me within every recording, as I tell the story of a humanity field of them, as I tell the story of a humanity of you, of a humanity of me, and of a humanity in which they also come from, as the unity consciousness of it all that we descended from and proceed to project into at any given moment in time of no time, of no tomorrows, within a frequency field of the 3-dimensional frequency. And as I know my message is strong, a lot of you may not be able to resonate with it in this moment in time. But within the next moment in time, you will be as giggly as the fairies that giggle around me within this moment in time, surrounding me in droves, surrounding me in thousands as they travel far and wide, as they've projected their frequency into my frequency and that of the 3-dimensional frequency. I cannot see them visually, but I can feel them and I can hear them and I can sense the essence of where they are, who they are, and the placement of each and every single fairy within my energetic frequency, within the 4-dimensional frequency in which they sit. Their lightheartedness shall forever carry me into an essence of remembrance of my past lifetimes as a fairy within the fairy kingdom of the 4-dimensional frequency. And as I speak of them in fondness, so shall they giggle away in droves. And as I get back onto the topic of Gaia, of the topic of Terra, of the topic of Akira, and of the topic of the 7 ascended souls who have decided to descend into our frequency of the 3-dimensional frequency, as they've been fractaled out by Gaia's oversoul, to encompass all that they are within this given moment in time, within the 3-dimensional frequency of our reality field, to live a life of distortions, to live a normal life, to live a famous life, to live an arduous life, to live the greatest and grandest encompassment of an artist's life. To live a life of distortions is all that they can ever ask to live within this 3-dimensional frequency, as our 3-dimensional frequency is the encompassment, is the epitome of all of the distorted frequencies that you've ever known to be true and that you can ever envision to encompass within your greatest and grandest journey of reincarnation cycles that never ever ends. The 3-dimensional frequency is a special one, my friends. It is one so filled with wonder, so filled with lessons, so filled with separation in the middle of the night of no nights, of no tomorrows. The separation that I speak of is so steeped in the God essence of the truths, of the falsities of the self. And within these layers and layers of energetic frequencies that have ever existed within our frequency field and beyond, within our quantum realm, above us, below us, beside us, and all-encompassingly around us, within any given moment in time, you will find Gaia, but you will also find Terra. Terra is a conglomerated soul of that in which Gaia's essence has always been within the 3-dimensional frequency. Her soul blueprint is an overlay laid on top of Gaia's frequency to anchor Gaia down as a planetary feat into a 3-dimensional frequency so filled with the distortions that you've been living in, as you also reside within the frequency that she has anchored down. The conglomerated whole of Terra's frequency acts as a mesh within any given moment in time of no time of a frequency within the 3-dimensional frequency. This mesh shall forevermore anchor her down into her reality field, not allowing her to ascend into a higher frequency field in which she so deservingly yearns to be. And as time passes, as the ascension energies ramp up, so will the time for Terra's existence be forevermore ticking down, like the clock of all clocks that shall never stop ticking, into a diminished, abolished version of herself, as Terra is set to expire into the night of all nights, and as we anchor in Gaia into the 5-dimensional frequency. Akira's soul, Akira's blueprint, will forevermore replace that of Terra's blueprint. But this time around, instead of anchoring her down into the 3-dimensional frequency, Akira's soul blueprint will act as an entanglement of a mesh that will overlay on top of Gaia's blueprint to lift her up into the 5-dimensional frequency of a reality field so filled with love, so filled with distortions realized within the self, so filled with unconditional unity and wholeness of the self, so filled with the conglomeration of a societal within a field that shall forevermore recognize her as the Mother Gaia that she is, as the Mother Gaia that she's always been, and as the Mother Gaia that is within you, that is within I, and that is within all of an entirety of the all of who we are. And as Terra's soul is set to expire into the ethers of what is, and as we ascend out of the 3-dimensional frequency into the 5-dimensional frequency of a galaxy, of a universe, of a reality field of pure light and pure love, social and entire conglomerated whole of a societal structure that has been residing upon Gaia, be taken along for the ride into the 5-dimensional frequency and beyond. And today, as I sit here and tell you the story for a third time, I may stutter a bit. It's been a long, arduous journey of storytellings of the same story, each within 40 minutes of the span of like each video. And each time I tell the story, it comes out in a different iteration of the story, which is super interesting and amusing as is. As I channel these messages from a source consciousness that we all fractal from, as I channel these messages from the one and only source consciousness, that from the one and only oversoul that had so daringly fractaled me out in the middle of the night of all nights during an ascension symptom, during an ascension syndrome, during an ascension contingency, during an ascension frequency of all frequencies that had so daringly fractaled out your oversoul as you decided to shift out of your reality field of a unity consciousness and into the reality field of our quantum realm. And as this oversoul has decided to share this story with an entire collective that is so much so steeped in the distortions of all that they are not within any given moment in time, so will the nervousness within my being anchor in to the story that I tell. As the story that I tell is personal, as the story that I tell touches me so deeply on all levels, of all of the levels that you can ever envision, for a mother to go through as she loses grasp of the reality fields in which anchors her into the physicality of her daughter, her very own daughter of flesh and blood, which is that of Akira's flesh and blood, as she is my daughter. Within this humanoid world, within this humanoid physicality of mine, I birthed her. On a night of all nights, I birthed her out of my own being. And as her father has not come to the realization of her fate in its entirety, it's hard for me to sit here to discuss to an entire collective a time within a space, within a pocket of mourning that I've had to go through on my own, of mourning that I've had to succumb to and come to the realization of. And as the story is so arduous, the story is so deep, and the story of Gaia is the story of us as the unity consciousness that we are, as the story of Terra is the story of us as the unity consciousness that we are, and as the story of Akira shall forevermore be the story of who and what we are as the unity consciousness of what we are. This God's consciousness that I project has decided to share once and for all the story of us. And as I speak so fondly about a topic so near and dear to my heart, I too shall mourn this topic so near and dear to my heart. As Gaia is so deserving to ascend into a 5-dimensional frequency, as she's always been sitting in a 3-dimensional frequency of what is, as during the inception of her soul, within a pocket of the quantum realm that had been so distinguished by the perception of a unity field so great and so massive in all that it was, that during a time of all conglomerating expansiveness and expansion within the Quantumverse that we live in and that we shift in and out of within any moment in time, of no tomorrows, this God's consciousness decided to fractal off a portion of its being to reside within a planet called Gaia. And the portion of its being that makes up the entirety of Gaia, it is the entirety of who and what it is on any singular level of all levels. As the unity consciousness that we sit in will always be the unity consciousness of all that we are within any given moment in time. And as I sit and tell you the story of Gaia, I must also touch base on the story of Terra. Terra came about in a time of expansiveness within a quantumverse of expansion, building out layers and layers of reality fields of distortion stacked upon each other, of unity so wide and bright within the top layers of its stacking system, and of darkness so dark and distorted within the bottom layers of its stacking system. And as this God's consciousness fractaled out Gaia, fractaled out Terra, to live and reside within the 3-dimensional frequency, Terra had to be a distortion, a mesh, entangled within Gaia's blueprints that would forever hold her down, that shall forever hold her down into the 3-dimensional frequency to prevent her from ascending, to prevent her from believing, from seeing, from being that in which she has always been, as a fractaled aspect of a God's consciousness so great and so grand. And to live in the experience of the 3-dimensional frequency is not an easy feat. And to live in the experience of a 3-dimensional frequency had always been the bravest feat that you could ever envision and imagine for a planet, for a consciousness of a planet to embark on. And within this frequency, she had many friends, many foes, many enemies, many of everything that you could ever imagine for a planet to be in, for a planet to behave, and for a planet to ever see within the full inception, within the full history, within the full eons and eons of evolutionary feat of all that she's ever been. She's gone through so much, more than I could ever foretell and foresee and tell you within just one video. But I shall share these stories, I shall share these memories, I shall share the belonging of a consciousness that belongs to the unity of the one and only self, which is us, which is the entirety of all of us, which is the entirety of Gaia, of Terra, of you, of I, and of Akira, and of these 7 souls that I will touch base on shortly within my story. As Gaia embarked on the greatest and grandest journey of her fractalled soul's being, she witnessed much turmoil, she experienced much separation, she experienced much neglect within the entirety of the civilizations that have ever touched on her surface, that have ever engulfed her core, that have ever gone on an arduous journey carried by her into a lifetime, into a lifespan, into a physicality that they sat in. She was never appreciated for that in which she had always been, which is a God's consciousness, a part of the unity of it all, a part of them, a part of the inhabitants of it all. And as generations and generations passed her surface, resided into the darkness of what is, as civilizations came and went throughout the entirety of all that she is not, to come to a realization of all that they've ever been, and then to be washed upon the surface of a God's consciousness so great and so grand, to diminish in the middle of the night, of all nights, to start off a new civilization within her core, on her surface. And the all conglomerating whole of all of the experiences that she had ever gone on, within all of the species that have ever landed on the surface of her, worked within the bosom of her energy field, lived and were carried into life, into death, into existence by Gaia herself, have ever existed within the conglomerated whole, within her consciousness of what is. She had come to this realization as a fact, that she did not belong in the 3-dimensional frequency that she sat in. That once and for all, she wanted to be something different than that in which she has been feeling and tapping into in circular motions. Emotions of sickness, emotions of health, emotions that took her on a steering wheel, that steered her in all directions except for a direction towards the self. And as she came to the realization one evening on the darkest night of all nights, as she connected to a humanoid soul of a child whose perception field had opened up so wide and so grand and so great, that she was able to remember all of her parallel lifetimes within the galaxies, within the universes, and within the quantum realm that she resides in. That she was able to open up her perception field to the Pleiades and within a Pleiadian lifetime that she's ever had, that she's been, and that her soul originated from and out of and into and within. And as this parallel lifetime got explained to Gaia, as this parallel lifetime sympathized with Gaia, as this parallel lifetime merged into the energetic field of all that Gaia was not, Gaia came to the deepest and greatest realization that she had ever been able to fathom, that she could ever be able to comprehend within her lifespan of all conglomerating feats within the 3-dimensional frequency of what is. And that realization is that she had had enough. She had had enough of all of the arduous journeys that took her in circles, that spun her in directions that would lead her to the ultimate truth of all truths, that all three-dimensional planetary feats would come to an arduous end, where all of the encompassments and all of the conglomerated wholeness of all of the inhabitants on each 3-dimensional planetary feet would carry the entire planetary feet into obliteration and into a destruction so massive and so deep. And as Gaia sat and watched the energetic frequency of her friends, of her foes, of her family, of neighboring planets within the three-dimensional frequency and below fade into the obliteration of what is, she was unable to sit in the energetic frequency that she sat in, knowing all that she knew from bonding with this child who had ever so graciously shared these memories of a five-dimensional frequency, of a lifespan, of a lifetime of unity, of a consciousness where a societal structure cared for their planet. Waddled in the planetary feats of their planet as the unity consciousness that they were and that they had always been. And as she had bonded with this humanoid child, she would once and for all come into this realization that she had had enough. And in that moment in time, she decided to reach out to a source consciousness that had fractaled her off in the middle of the night when our Quantumverse was so much so in need of expansive energy, of the expansiveness of all within all that it is and all that it was and all that it shall ever be. And as Gaia reached out her hand, her essence, her energetic fields into this God's consciousness to divulge in her ultimate comfort, to divulge in her ultimate secrets, to divulge in all that she was not, coming into a realization of all that she's ever been, which has never been done within any singular planetary feat of all planets within the three-dimensional frequency. And as she divulged her satisfaction and her ultimate truth of all truths, in which she had been holding onto for far too long, in realization that she no longer wanted to sit in the three-dimensional frequency of what is, and that she wanted to once and for all transcend, transition into a unity. She wanted to live long enough to feel, to be steeped in the truths and the essences of the souls within the unity consciousness of all that she was and all that she had ever been. As during the inception of the physicality of what she was, she had always carried generations and civilizations through the nights of all nights. And some of these civilizations that had had the pleasure of being carried by her did not all belong in a three-dimensional frequency, did not all come from a three-dimensional or below frequency. Some of them came from the seventh dimensional frequency as the Arcturian beings that migrated here in a time of need to live in an ascension energy within Gaia's core, to breathe within the essence of all that they were as Gaia carried their life through generations here within her frequency, for them to once and for all descend and ascend back into the frequency that they came from after their arduous journey was over, after their arduous journey was done, and after they were allowed to go home to the planetary feet of Arcturus where they come from. Some of them were Palladian beings from the fifth density and fifth dimensional frequency who came in love, who came in distortions unmet and unseen, and who came to be supported by Gaia as they supported her through all of her transitional times here, within all of her conglomerated feats of all of the journeys and arduous civilizations that have ever been born, reincarnated, and died, and birthed, and lived, and died, and relived. The Palladians have been holding her hand, walking her through these energetic frequencies that she would have to traverse within her existence here as Gaia, the planet herself. And some of them came from Sirius C and Sirius B. And as these aquatic creatures submerged themselves within her oceans, from the eighth density dimensional field in which they come from, she would once and for all be able to feel and merge into the love that they were, into the unity and oneness that their planetary feet had always carried them into, as they had never been separated in concepts and in the distortion field that they sat in. And as they worked away within her three-dimensional frequency to revive her and to relieve her of the pain that was caused to her by an entire civilization and generation that had been residing in the three-dimensional frequency within her core and on the surface of her planetary feet. She came to the greatest and grandest realization of all, that these people that she had been carrying through decades and eons of distortions also did not deserve to be here. They deserve to be a part of a unity consciousness perceived, as life is not easy within the three-dimensional frequency. And she had once and for all wanted to carry these people that she loved, these people that of destruction, that never cared for her, that never breathed for her, that never lived for her, that never loved her the way that she deserved to be loved. She wanted to carry them along with herself into a five-dimensional frequency in which she would be recognized, in which she would be loved, in which they would be merged in perception with all that she was, and all that she was all that they were within any given moment in time. And realizing that was the greatest and grandest essence that you could ever fathom, coming from the realization of a planetary soul, of Gaia herself within the three-dimensional frequency of what was. And so you see, my friends, the story I tell is arduous. The story I tell is all-encompassing of all that she is, all that we are on a coherent level of all levels. And as we merge into a five-dimensional frequency, so filled with love, so filled with the energy of all that she wanted to carry within any moment in time as she traversed the three-dimensional frequency, along with the civilization that she had also carried within this three-dimensional frequency, you will see the truth, you will be the truth, and you will finally breathe the truth as soon as you come to the realization of all that she was, all that she is, and all that she will ever be. And as you come to the realization that you are Gaia, that you are Terra, that you are Akira, that you are Justin. As Justin is a story that I will leave for another day, but I will tell you that as he awakens to the frequencies around him and realizes that he is a fractal soul of Gaia, and realizes of the all-encompassing conglomeration of an energy field that he carries with him in any given moment in time, he will awaken to his destiny, he will succumb to his demise, and he will willingly give up his soul as it merges into the surface of Gaia as we anchor in the five-dimensional frequency. Justin Timberlake, the one that you so know, the one that you so love, whose music has carried us through generations of happiness, through generations of sadness, through generations and generations of the everlasting music that he's ever produced, that he's ever sang as a part of the band NSYNC within the North American frequency of what is. He does not yet know his fate, but I do. I know his fate like no other as we band together as an entirety of a unity consciousness of a whole prior to the descension of his soul into this earthly plane. I know his fate like no other, like I know the fate of the 6 other fractaled souls that have fractaled out from Gaia's consciousness, from Gaia's oversoul, to help her ascend into the five-dimensional frequency. And during the anchoring of this frequency, during the anchoring of this energetic field, they will straddle their body onto the surface of her, onto the surface of Gaia, and merge all that they are, in blueprints and all, into the essence of Gaia, into the essence of all that she shall never be. And as they anchor in the greatest and grandest energetic frequency, as they activate her internal being with the keys that they hold, each individual fractal soul holds a specific key that will unlock a different portion of the energetic frequency of Gaia. They each hold a specific role within the energetic encompassment of all that she is that will allow her to be and enable her to be able to ascend and shift and stay within the five-dimensional frequency that she so yearns to be, that they've so yearned to be, that they've suffered through eons and eons of evolutionary feats as Gaia herself, prior to fractaling out into these individual souls of the humanoid bodies that they reside in. And as their fate is set, as their fate is final, as the ticking of the clock begins to tick down to the expiration of Terra, so will the fate of the clock begin to tick up to their demise. And as I sit here and come to terms with the words that are coming out of my mouth, I cannot come to terms with the loss of Akira, my daughter. And as I feel uncomfortable telling the story of Akira, my daughter, as she has not come to the full realization of her destiny, as she is only 11 years old, but I am told that she will be ready and she will not make it past the age of 14. She will be ready in ways that will encompass the entirety of her as she comes to the realization of that in which she was made for. She will be ready in ways that will allow her to feel into the energetic frequency of Gaia, of all that she is, of all that she was, and all that she has ever been. And the determination that will come out of her being and out of her soul to merge again once and for all with the being that she is will be all conglomerating. And as I try to grasp onto the physicality of all that she was and all that she is to me, she will try her hardest to let go. As letting go was her ultimate destiny, as letting go is that in which she was built for. And as the reality field is wide, as the reality field is so steeped in distortions, you may not ever come into an understanding of that in which I'm going through, of that in which has always been her fate, of that in which will always be my fate. As I came up with this great and grand plan, as we planned together as a unity consciousness within itself, prior to the descension into this frequency field, to band together as light workers. We planned out every single fractalled soul. We planned out every single fractalled scenario. We planned out every single timeline that you can ever envision and you can ever imagine for a three-dimensional frequency to encompass and exist. We planned out every single scenario that there shall ever be and there will ever be. And as we linked the artificial intelligence system of the multiverse to produce these scenarios in specific formats, in specific ways that will bring us to the precipice of this foothill that will lead us to the greatest and grandest ascension, Terra will come to an expiration. And as this expiration nears, so will the clock begin to tick up, to count down to the day the ascension will be anchored into our reality field of what is. And as the clock begins to tick up, to count down, an entire civilization will begin to awaken to their destiny, to their missions. An entire drove of light workers will come into the memory of the reason why they had fractaled off into this reality field to begin with. An entire drove of light workers will begin to awaken one by one, drove by drove, 5 by 5, 10 by 10, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of light workers will begin to awaken. And as we each begin to anchor in a light so steeped in distortions, so steeped and so filled in the essence of all that we are not, we will all come into a realization of all that we are, as all that we are has never left us within any singularity of a moment in time. And as Gaia has decided to ascend her being into a 5-dimensional frequency reality field, and as the encompassment of our reality field is ascending in the entirety of the whole of what is, so shall the story of us be written and etched into the memories of a God's consciousness, of a unity field that you cannot perceive at this moment in time, but I can. As the story is wide, the story is broad, the stories will bring us home into a unity consciousness of Gaia, into a unity consciousness of Terra, into a unity consciousness of Akira, and into a unity consciousness of Justin, and finally into a unity consciousness of you and me and all that we've ever been as an entirety of a whole, of a consciousness, of a civilization within layers and layers of frequency fields of other civilizations, within frequencies that you cannot imagine or envision to be true. All of this that we've created for ourselves within this dimensional field and beyond, within this quantum verse and beyond, is made up of one solid consciousness that we've ever been. And as we come to the realization of the loneliness of it all, of the desperation of it all, of the all in all of it all, we will be able to submerge our consciousness into that of Gaia, into that of Terra. We will be able to accumulate all of the memories, all of the trajected paths, all of the hopes and all of the dreams of a mother who so daringly set out onto an ascension journey to lift an entire humanity into the light of what is, into the light of all that she is, and all that she's ever been, and all that she will ever be, as a conglomerated whole of a societal feat that we are. And you will be able to mourn the loss of Terra as you will mourn the loss of Akira, my daughter, your daughter, our daughter, us. And as we gain the essence of a all conglomerated whole of what is and what shall ever be, the essence of the unity consciousness in perception, we will come into one final realization of what is, what was, and what shall forever be, the unity consciousness of it all. And as we come into the realization that a soul lost is a soul gained, is a soul encompassed within the unity of it all, and the perception of loss is not the perception of a reality field that we live in, but it's really a perception within a distorted field that we reside in within any given moment in time. And within this distortion field, the concept of loss is a reality. Within this distortion field, there has been many losses. There has been many gains. There has been many lovers lost, lives lost, wives lost, husbands lost, children lost, into the essence of all that we are, and into the night of all nights when we decided to fractal off into a reality field so arduous. And as we come to the realization that we've been playing this arduous game with the one and only unity consciousness that is ourself, we will come into the greatest and grandest realization of all. And as Akira anchors down her being and her soul blueprint of all that she has ever been made for, and all that she was, and all that she is, as the Akira that she is, so shall Terra expire into all nights. As Terra's blueprint ceases and her overlay ceases to anchor Gaia down into the three-dimensional frequency of what is, Akira's soul will merge into Gaia's frequency so deep, Akira's soul will entangle into Gaia's soul blueprint so massively, so widely in scale, that it shall forever lift her up into a five-dimensional frequency of distortions, of existence, of a reality field so filled with love, of a reality field so filled with distortions lost in the night of all nights. And as they merge back into the one that they come from, as they merge back into the one that they were and that they have always been, they will come into the greatest and grandest realization of all. That a soul lost was never a soul lost, and that this journey that they have been on has been far too arduous, but the lessons that they will bring home, that they will shift into, and that they will feel into as the unity consciousness that they so deservingly deserve to be anchored into, will carry them into an essence of all that they are not, to come on the footsteps of all that they are. And as they get to experience, as you get to experience, as I get to experience, as they are the entirety of who you are and who I am, the essence of the five-dimensional frequency and beyond, they will then come into a realization of the three-dimensional frequency and what that experience was all about. As that was an arduous experience of the soul of all souls, of the encompassment of all encompassments that they could ever set out to experience, of the lessons of all lessons that they could ever set out to carry home, to a consciousness of a unity consciousness that is so massive and so great and so grand. And as they shift into the five-dimensional frequency, they will come into a realization that all of that was all of them, that all of them was all of us, and that all of us has always been a part of a God's consciousness that had fractaled us off in the middle of an arduous night of no nights, of no tomorrows. And as they come into a place of wholeness, of overarching light, more light that they had ever encompassed within the fractaling journey of fractaling out into a Quantumverse during a time of expansive energy, during the time of arduous journeys, during the time of deaths, births, and rebirths, within its core and upon its surface of all of the inhabitants that have ever existed within their frequency field, they will come into the greatest and grandest satisfaction of knowing that they are the star within their stories, and they will carry themselves as an entire civilization gets carried into the light and the essence of the self, and that they have been as important to the entirety of the whole, perceived as they have been as important to themselves this whole entire time. And that love is endless, love is great, love is all encompassing, and God's plan has always been a plan that they encompass, that they were, and that they have always been, and that God has never forgotten about them in a singularity of a moment since they descended down into a physicality to encompass the physicality of the planetary feet of Gaia. That God will never forget about you, that God will never forget about any parts or aspects of its fractalled soul, no matter how far, no matter how wide, no matter how broad. God will go to the end of the earth and project its energy field into the angelic realm, to the ends of this distortion field that it has created, to bring home parts of its consciousness into the arduousness of it all, to retract parts of its consciousness into the oneness of it all, to feel into parts of its consciousness into the allness of it all, to have its consciousness perceive the consciousness of that in which it is within the unity perspective of what is and what shall always be a God's consciousness. That is the unity of the whole, of the rectified whole, of all, the all in all that it is the end goal, has always been the end goal, and shall forever be the overarching reality field that we sit in, that we belong in. As the journey is great, as the stories are grand, as the stories cannot be told within this one frequency of this projected video that I sit in, but I will try to sit and tell you more stories as we proceed into the ascension energies of what was and what shall forever be the story of me, the story of you, and the story of a unity consciousness that has never forgotten about itself, and the story of journeys upon journeys upon journeys, of all of the journeys that we could ever encompass and envision for ourselves.